The air outside had turned heavy, thick with the scent of rain. Inside the room, the last candle trembled, its flame fighting the wind sneaking through the cracks in the walls. The disciples sat in uneasy silence, their minds drowning in what they had just heard. One of them would betray him. One of them already had. Jesus stood, his shadow stretching long across the table. His eyes carried peace, yet his voice trembled with the weight of what lay ahead. "The hour has come," he said quietly, "and the Son of Man will be handed over." A shiver passed through the room. Peter rose abruptly, fists clenched. "No, Lord, I will never let that happen." Jesus looked at him, not with anger, but with sorrow. "Peter," he said gently, "before the rooster crows, you will deny me 3 times." The words hit Peter like a blade to the heart. He stepped back, shaking his head in disbelief. "Never," he whispered. "I would die before I deny you." But Jesus said nothing more. He simply placed a hand on Peter's shoulder, a gesture filled with both love and tragedy. The storm outside finally broke. Thunder rumbled across the sky, lightning flashing through the window and casting streaks of light on their faces. It was as if heaven itself was watching the struggle between faith and fear. The disciples began whispering among themselves. Some wanted to leave. Others wanted to stay. The weight of destiny was suffocating, pressing on every chest, every thought. Jesus spoke again, his tone soft but unshaken. "Do not let your hearts be troubled," he said. "You believe in God, believe also in me." His words calmed the air for a moment, like sunlight breaking through storm clouds. But behind his peace, there was pain, a quiet acceptance that the path ahead would lead through betrayal, through blood, through the cross. Thomas raised his voice, hesitant. "Lord, we do not know where you are going. How can we follow you?" Jesus turned toward him, his expression kind. "I am the way, the truth, and the life," he said. "No one comes to the Father except through me." The disciples listened, but their hearts were torn. They wanted to believe, yet fear held them captive. Every word Jesus spoke carried light, but the shadows of doubt lingered behind their eyes as he spoke of love, of the Father's house, of the promise beyond death. Thunder cracked once more outside, shaking the walls. The storm was not only in the sky, it was within them. Judas's absence lingered like a ghost. His empty seat was a reminder that loyalty could crumble, that even among the faithful, darkness could find a home. Peter stared at the empty chair, his jaw tight, his faith being tested by the weight of his own pride. The others looked to Jesus for strength, their fear clinging to him like a child to a father. Jesus finally lifted his eyes upward, whispering, "Father, the time has come. Glorify your Son." The camera would pull back, showing the flickering candlelight reflecting off their weary faces. The storm raging outside, and the gentle figure of Jesus standing still in the chaos. That night, faith and fear stood face to face. And though fear spoke louder, faith refused to be silent. The rain had stopped, but the world still wept in silence. The streets of Jerusalem were empty, now wet stones glistening under the pale moonlight. Jesus and his disciples walked slowly through the narrow path that led to the Mount of Olives. Their sandals splashed softly in the puddles as the night wind whispered through the olive trees. Every step carried the weight of prophecy, every breath the taste of sorrow. They reached a quiet garden called Gethsemane. The trees stood like watchmen in the dark, their branches bowing low, as though even creation mourned what was to come. Jesus stopped and turned to the others. His face was calm, yet shadowed by something eternal. "Stay here," he said softly, "and pray." The disciples nodded, though their eyes were heavy with exhaustion. Jesus walked a few steps ahead, alone, and fell to his knees. The soil was damp beneath him, and the cold of the earth seemed to reach into his soul. He lifted his eyes toward heaven. "Father," he whispered, "if it is possible, take this cup from me. Yet not my will, but yours be done." His voice broke with pain, not from fear of death, but from the burden of what he must carry, the sin of every heart, the sorrow of every soul. Sweat fell from his face, glistening like drops of blood in the dim moonlight. Behind him, his disciples had fallen asleep. Peter leaned against a rock, his sword at his side, unaware that his courage would soon be tested. Jesus looked back at them with a gentle sadness. "Could you not watch with me for 1 hour?" he asked quietly, his voice trembling more with heartbreak than anger. He turned his gaze once more to the heavens. "The spirit is willing," he said, "but the flesh is weak." Then came the sound, soft at first, then growing clearer, the crunch of footsteps on the wet path. Torches flickered in the distance, lighting the faces of soldiers marching through the garden. Their armor glinted beneath the moon like cold fire. Judas walked at their front. His face was pale, his eyes empty, his soul already lost to the silver in his hand. He approached Jesus, forcing a smile that could not hide the tremor in his voice. "Rabbi," he said. Jesus looked at him with eyes that held no hatred, only sorrow. "Friend," he replied, "do what you came to do." And then, with a trembling hand, Judas stepped forward and kissed his teacher's cheek. The sound of that single kiss echoed louder than thunder, a mark of love turned into betrayal. The soldiers moved quickly, seizing Jesus by the arms. Peter drew his sword in fury, striking one of them, but Jesus stopped him. "Put your sword away," he said firmly. "Shall I not drink the cup my Father has given me?" The torches burned brighter now, throwing long shadows across the garden. The disciples watched, frozen between faith and fear. One by one, they fled into the night. Jesus stood alone, bound, silent, calm. The Son of Man in chains, yet freer than all who held him, as they led him away. The moon slipped behind the clouds, and the garden sank into darkness. The wind rose again, carrying with it the faint echo of his prayer, "Your will be done." The camera would linger on the empty garden, the torn soil where he knelt, the whisper of olive leaves swaying in the night. The peace had ended. The prophecy was in motion. The night split open with chaos. The stillness of the garden was going to replace by the clash of steel, the shouts of soldiers, and the sound of hearts breaking. The torches cast wild shadows on the olive trees as Jesus was dragged through the darkness. His hands bound, but his spirit unshaken. Peter followed at a distance, his breath sharp in his chest. He could still taste fear bitter, metallic, and real. Every flicker of torchlight revealed faces twisted in confusion, disciples scattered. Faith fractured, promises forgotten. The soldiers led Jesus through the narrow streets, their armor clanging against the stones. From the windows above, a few silent watchers looked down, unaware that history was passing beneath their feet. The sky hung heavy with clouds, as if even heaven refused to look. Inside the high priest's courtyard, the air was thick with murmurs. The council had gathered the powerful, the proud, the frightened. They whispered accusations like poison. False witnesses stepped forward, their lies sharp and rehearsed. Yet Jesus said nothing. His silence was louder than their rage. One man shouted, "He claims to be the Son of God." Another struck him, but Jesus did not flinch. He looked at them not with anger, but with pity, a look that said, "You do not know what you are doing." Outside, Peter waited in the shadows. A servant girl pointed at him, her eyes wide. "You were with him," she said. Peter shook his head quickly. "I don't know the man." Another voice joined in. "You're one of his followers." Again, Peter denied it, his voice louder now, cracking under the weight of fear. A third time, someone said, "Your voice betrays you. You are one of them." Peter's heart pounded. "I swear, I do not know him." He cried, and then the sound. A rooster crowed, clear and haunting, slicing through the night like a blade. Peter froze. His chest tightened as the memory of Jesus' words came rushing back. Before the rooster crows, "You will deny me 3 times." Across the courtyard, Jesus turned his head. Their eyes met. No words were spoken, only the unbearable silence of truth. Peter stumbled backward, his vision blurred with tears. He ran into the dark, his sobs swallowed by the wind. Inside, the mocking continued. A soldier struck Jesus and said, "Prophesy, Messiah." "Who hit you?" Laughter echoed in the hall, cruel and hollow. The camera would linger on Jesus' face, bleeding but calm. There was no hate, no fury, only love that refused to die. As dawn approached, the city began to stir. The priests, desperate to end what they feared, dragged Jesus before Pilate. The sky was turning pale, the first light of morning revealing the path to the cross. Judas watched from afar, his soul breaking under the weight of silver coins in his hand. He threw them to the ground, the sound ringing like shattered promises. "I have betrayed innocent blood." He screamed, but the world did not answer. He disappeared into the shadows he had chosen, leaving behind the echo of regret. And as the sun began to rise, Jesus stood before the crowd, silent, bound, and radiant in suffering. The people who once shouted Hosanna now cried, "Crucify him." The drums of destiny beat louder. The end was near, but it was not defeat. For though the world saw a prisoner, heaven saw a savior. The screen fades to black. The sound of the wind carries one last whisper. This is only the beginning. The world was silent that night. No wind, no laughter, no song. Only the faint sound of footsteps echoing through the old stone streets of Jerusalem. Inside a quiet upper room, 12 men gathered around a table, unaware that their final meal together would change history forever. Their faces carried hope, fear, and questions. They followed the man who walked on water, who calmed storms, who raised the dead. But tonight, even he seemed different. His eyes held something deeper, sorrow wrapped in peace. The candles flickered like fading stars, and the air felt heavy, almost sacred. It was the calm before the storm, the night, when love would be tested, faith would tremble, and destiny would whisper. The table was set, simple yet full of meaning. Loaves of bread rested beside a single cup of wine, their quiet presence holding the weight of eternity. Jesus sat among his disciples, his hands folded, his gaze distant. Around him, they spoke softly, unaware of the darkness inching closer. Peter leaned forward, breaking the uneasy silence. "Master," he asked, "why does your heart seem troubled tonight?" Jesus looked at him, his voice calm but heavy with truth. "Because one of you will betray me." The words fell like thunder. The laughter stopped. Every heartbeat in the room grew louder. The disciples looked at one another, confusion in their eyes. Judas froze for a moment, his fingers trembling beside his cup. The others didn't notice. "Not yet." Matthew whispered, "Surely not me, Lord." And one by one, they repeated it, fear wrapped in faith. Jesus' eyes moved slowly from one face to another. His gaze was not of anger, but of love, a love deep enough to forgive even the one who would turn against him. Outside, the sound of footsteps echoed in the narrow alleys, distant but approaching. The city was asleep, but heaven was awake. The angels watched, holding their breath as prophecy unfolded. The room grew colder. The candles flickered, and in that soft, trembling light, destiny sat beside them. Jesus broke the bread and lifted it with care. "This is my body," he said quietly, "given for you." His voice carried both pain and promise. He passed the bread around, his eyes never leaving Judas. The traitor hesitated before taking his piece. Then Jesus took the cup, his reflection dancing in the red wine. "This is my blood, poured out for many." Each disciple drank, their hearts heavy, their minds clouded with mystery. They didn't yet understand this meal was not just supper. It was surrender. It was sacrifice. As the final drop of wine touched Judas's lips, a shadow passed over his face. He stood, unable to meet his teacher's eyes. Jesus spoke again, softly, "What you are about to do, do it quickly." The door creaked open. Judas vanished into the night, swallowed by the darkness he had chosen. Inside, silence reigned once more. The disciples looked to their master, unsure, afraid. Jesus closed his eyes and whispered a prayer no one could hear. The Last Supper had begun, and so had the end. Its final secret. The door creaked open, and the room seemed to hold its breath. The faint glow of candlelight painted every shadow on the walls, turning silence into a living thing. The disciples entered one by one, their footsteps soft, their hearts uncertain. The smell of roasted herbs, fresh bread, and oil filled the air, a simple meal for a night that would echo through eternity. Jesus stood near the table, his face calm but unreadable. His eyes held both love and sorrow, as if he could already see what was coming: the betrayal, the trial, the cross. Yet still, he welcomed them with a quiet smile. "Come," he said softly, "sit with me." The men obeyed, taking their places around the long wooden table. Their laughter was faint, forced, like a memory trying to survive in the face of something greater. Thomas poured the wine, his hands shaking slightly. Peter looked at him and tried to laugh, but even his strong voice carried unease. Then, in the midst of that uneasy stillness, Jesus reached for the bread. His movements were slow, deliberate, every gesture heavy with meaning. He tore the loaf in half, the sound of breaking bread cutting through the silence like thunder. "This," he said, holding it up, "is my body given for you." No one spoke. No one moved. They could not yet understand, but they could feel the weight of it. Something sacred was happening, something beyond words. Jesus passed the bread, and each man took a piece with trembling hands. John watched him closely, his eyes wide with both awe and fear. Beside him, Judas stared at the table, avoiding everyone's gaze. The light from the candles flickered across his face, revealing the war inside him: love fighting against guilt, faith wrestling with greed. Then Jesus lifted the cup, the deep red wine shimmering in the golden glow. "This is my blood," he whispered, "poured out for the forgiveness of many." The disciples drank in silence. The moment felt eternal, suspended between heaven and earth. As they ate, Jesus spoke gently, sharing words of peace. But beneath his calm tone, there was something else, a final warning hidden in kindness. "Love one another as I have loved you," he said. "For where I go, you cannot follow." "Not yet." Peter looked up, defiant yet afraid. "Lord, I will follow you anywhere." Jesus turned to him, sadness softening his voice. "Before the rooster crows, you will deny me 3 times." The words landed like stones in the heart. Peter fell silent, his eyes lowered. Around the table, the others exchanged uneasy glances. The warmth of the meal now touched by cold fear. Outside, thunder rolled in the distance. The wind pushed against the shutters, as if the world itself could sense what was to come. Jesus looked at the table one last time. The bread, the wine, the faces of those he loved, and a small smile formed on his lips. "Do this," he said quietly, "in remembrance of me." As the camera would linger on his hand, steady, gentle, divine, before fading into darkness. In that moment, the Last Supper was no longer just a meal. It became a promise, a prophecy, and the heartbeat of faith itself. The night deepened, and the room glowed with a quiet unease. The candles burned lower, their light trembling like souls caught between faith and fear. The disciples sat in silence now. The warmth of the meal had faded, placed by something unseen, a heaviness that pressed on every heart. Jesus looked around the table, his eyes moving slowly from face to face. His voice, when it came, was calm, but it carried a power that made the air itself seem to listen. "One of you," he said softly, "will betray me." The words cut through the air like a blade. The men froze. No one dared breathe. The sound of the wind outside seemed to stop. Each of them turned to the other, confusion and dread rising like a storm within them. Peter leaned forward, his voice cracking. "Lord, who is it?" Jesus said nothing at first. His gaze fell on the bread, on the crumbs scattered across the table. Slowly, he dipped a piece into the wine and lifted it. "The one to whom I give this," he said, "is the one." All eyes followed as he extended his hand toward Judas. The silence was unbearable. Judas' eyes flickered, fear, guilt, anger, all tangled in one fleeting moment. He took the bread, and time seemed to stop. The flickering flame beside him dimmed, as though even the light could not bear witness to what was happening. Then Jesus spoke again, his voice almost a whisper. "What you are about to do? Do quickly." Judas' breath caught in his throat. He looked around, his gaze meeting no one's. The others were still too shocked to move. He stood, his chair scraping against the floor, the sound echoing like thunder in the quiet room. He turned and left. The door closed behind him with a heavy thud, and then silence. A silence so deep it felt alive. John leaned closer to Jesus, his eyes filled with worry. "Master," he said quietly, "where is he going?" Jesus looked toward the door where Judas had vanished. "Into the night," he replied, his words heavy with both sorrow and acceptance. Outside, the moon hung low, casting long shadows across the streets of Jerusalem. Judas walked faster, his heart pounding. The silver coins clinked softly in his pocket, a sound that would haunt him forever. Back in the room, Jesus spoke again, breaking the stillness. "Now," he said, "the Son of Man is glorified, and God is glorified in him." The disciples didn't understand. Their minds were trapped between fear and faith. But Jesus did not explain further. He simply looked at them, his expression tender, forgiving. "My children," he continued, "I will be with you only a little longer. Where I am going, you cannot come." The camera would glide slowly across their faces, Peter's disbelief, John's sorrow, Thomas's confusion. Every emotion was painted in candlelight, every tear reflecting the weight of the moment. Then, Jesus' voice softened even more. "A new command I give you," he said. "Love one another. As I have loved you, so you must love one another." The final words lingered, echoing in the room like a divine promise, a message that would outlive them all. And as the screen faded to black, the faint sound of footsteps echoed once more outside. The night was not over. The story had just begun to unfold. The sky was heavy with sorrow. Clouds rolled across the horizon like a curtain drawing over the world. The sound of chains, of footsteps, of voices crying out filled the air. But beneath the chaos, there was something else's stillness, as if the earth itself was holding its breath. They led Jesus through the streets, his body weary, his spirit unbroken. The crowd followed, some jeering, some weeping, some silent with guilt. The path was narrow. Every stone beneath his feet remembered the weight of what he carried, the burden of humanity itself. A cross was placed upon his shoulders. The wood was rough, splintered, and heavy, yet he bore it without a word. Every step was agony, every breath a prayer. And still he moved forward. The wind howled through the city gates, carrying whispers of destiny. The sun began to dim, turning gold to gray. Somewhere in the distance, thunder rolled, a sound not of nature, but of heaven mourning. He stumbled once, then again. Blood marked the path behind him, a trail of sacrifice written on the earth. But when he lifted his head, his eyes were calm, steady, eternal. Even in pain, he looked at the world with love. Atop the hill, the soldiers raised the cross. The hammer struck iron. The sound echoed through creation. Each strike was a heartbeat, each breath a promise. The crowd fell silent. Time itself seemed to pause. And then, with his final breath, he whispered, "It is finished." The earth trembled. The temple veil split in two. What began as death became the birth of hope. The camera would rise above the hill, showing the cross silhouetted against the storm darkness swallowing the world, yet a faint glow emerging from the horizon. A light, soft, pure, unstoppable, spreading across the land, cut to silence. A single drop of rain falls, then another. The ground softens. The stone before the tomb begins to shake. A blinding light bursts forth, warm, holy, eternal. The voiceover returns. Calm and powerful, he was betrayed for love. He died for redemption. But the story did not end in darkness. The music swells, a choir rising from whispers to thunder. On-screen text appears in golden light. The Chosen. Last Supper, an original series event coming soon on Prime. Video, the screen fades to black, leaving only the faint echo of a heartbeat and the whisper of hope before the cross. There was the table,